6 to 12%. That's the job placement rate for new engineering graduates right now. The people actually accountable for delivering AI systems, navigating incomplete signals, misaligned teams, and decisions that have to be made before anyone has the full pictures. Those voices are mostly invisible. This is Agentic AI Execution. I am Leena Agrawal. I spent 18 years at companies like Meta, Amazon, Cruise, Block, Woven by Toyota. I started this show because the most honest conversation about AI execution happened in hallways and Slack threads, and none of them ever made to public. No framework, no hype, just judgment call from people who have made them. Today's guest is Leah Melvoin, 23 years at Amazon, creator of Voice of Developer program. She's going to tell you exactly what engineering teams, leaders, and anyone trying to survive this transition actually need to hear. Let's get into it. To begin with, I'd like to understand, you created Voice of Developers at Amazon. Can you tell users what does Voice of Developer mean?
Voice of the Developer was a program that was based on Voice of the Customer, which was an Amazon approach to bringing the customer's opinions down upstream into engineering so that they could more directly experience what customers were going through in terms of pain points or opportunities. Well, they wanted to do something similar for software developers within Amazon, because at the time when I took on that role, there was only a small 8-person team was in charge of all developer tools for Amazon at the time. There was, Brazil and Apollo, and that was it. And there was nothing, no real language support. So like even Java at that point wasn't really supported by the tools. That's something I helped influence, let alone JavaScript or any other, software that came, language that came later. It was primarily a C++ home at the time. It was very early on in 2001 at Amazon. So the idea was I would aggregate issues that mattered to engineers, but the people that had done it before me, there were 2 people who had been Voice of the Developer TPMs before myself. And they would focus on one feature that Brazil needed or a feature that Apollo needed, and then they would work on that. And my approach was a little bit different. I thought, well, let me just ask engineers at the company, like all of them, what's bothering you about anything. Like I didn't even limit the scope to tooling. I just wanted to know what was bothering people. And it was like an onslaught of, we don't like the compensation model, or we think the coffee sucks. It was just a really bad experience all the way around. And so I just started working on whatever I could. I took any problem that I felt like I could help resolve and worked on it. And so my first year as VOD, I resolved 78 pain points. And then the next year I did 22. They were, the quick ones were easy to do. And then it would just get harder and harder. Like our onboarding system was a mess. People would sign up people would join the company and there would be no desk or no computer. And so, I worked on that, but I worked on that for the whole company. It wasn't just on behalf of engineering. So that's what led to the tech survey, which initially started out as the SE survey. And it led to all the job leveling content that I did, because all of those were all pain points for engineers.
I'm curious, what are some of the things from Amazon engineering cultures which startups today, as they are growing, can try to imbibe, or which startup who are trying to build cutting edge AI technology can do something innovative around that employee models to give a better voice to developers?
Well, it's such a different world now with AI agentic development. It just is. The pain points are different. And they might be more along the lines of either being limited by their leadership in what they can accomplish, because the leadership doesn't either believe in the vision or doesn't see the point of taking that step. So an example of this can be a very product-focused startup that just doesn't want anyone to waste time on QA or cybersecurity. Those are just bad decisions, right? But I think that what Amazon got right was the 2-pizza team model, keeping teams small. And the original 2-pizza team model has been somewhat abandoned by Amazon. But I think in the world of agentic AI development, it could be resurrected and accomplish what Amazon set out to do 25 years ago with 2-pizza teams. So the concept was to have a team that was no larger than could consume 2 pizzas, which of course is subjective because I could eat 2 pizzas on my own. But if the theory is right, and the idea was you would have a product manager, a UX designer, a QA engineer, a few software developers, and if you needed a TPM, maybe, but that everybody would be co-located on the team and they would own the business problem end to end. So the product manager facing the business side and the engineers owning the technical side. And you would have a QA engineer if you needed it, if it was like a large process heavy area where you needed QA. Well, that kind of just grew into small scrum teams. They weren't really like heterogeneous in terms of their makeup. They were 8 engineers on a team and they're standing up. That's not the same as a 2-pizza team. That's not what a 2-pizza team was meant to be. So with agentic AI development, or just have Claude and you have Claude agents doing your coding, you can literally have a product manager, an engineer, and a UX designer if you want one. I think it's a good idea. I think UX UI is going to be very important in the new world. And I don't think AI should take the place of that because AI doesn't understand human engagement in the same way. So I do think UX UI engineers are going to be way more important than ever. And potentially maybe a security engineer, because I think that that's got to be something that also a human is analyzing in conjunction with AI. But I think you could have a team of 4 or 5 people and they could literally start a whole company. Or they could be a team focused on a full product and they could run that roadmap. They could run it. There is no reason to have lots of teams of engineers, like 10 engineers on a team focused on the same product when there's agents coding. But what you need is a diversity of engineering strength so that you're accomplishing the scaling challenges, the security challenges, the support and quality assurance challenges, the UX, UI, any kind of latency, you name it, right? You want the team to be the right people to solve the problem from end to end. And now you can do that as a 2-pizza team. Before it would have been an organization around one product because the product would grow and expand and you'd have to have all these teams doing sections of it. You don't need to do that in quite the same way. And so I think for startups, it's an extremely exciting time, but it's more risky because as you develop that, someone will be much easier for them to copy it, take it, roll it into their product, and then you're out of business. So you've got to figure out how to stay nimble and survive it. But you don't need as many people to solve the problem. You need the right people to solve the problem. And coding isn't the only skill anymore that you need, right? Because a lot of that is getting solved, but you do need someone that understands system design and who really understands what happens when you end up with a lot of code that nobody understands, and it makes it very complicated. So you need a senior engineer of some kind to keep that complexity to a minimum in the code base.
So I'm curious, how do you see, you have created these programs at Amazon where you have created leveling guides between junior engineer, senior engineer. How do you see this evolving in agentic AI phase?
I think it's going to be messy and very inhumane. I actually think it's going to be a dark period in engineering where you go to school to learn your field and there's no jobs for you. We're seeing 6 to 12% placement rates coming out of engineering degrees. That's not sustainable, right? And it's not acceptable to just say, become a prompt engineer or a context engineer or whatever. I don't think that that's just as simple as that. I think a lot of that is going to get coded out. So the question is really how to decide whether your skill can specialize and be useful in a certain way, or whether to go back to the drawing table and get a master's or something in product management, because product is really where it's going to be. It's going to be about the business of the product. The building of the product matters, like it always has, but a lot of those considerations can be dealt with by a very smart engineering group, right? But they just don't need as many coders now. And QA engineers, they don't need QA engineers. They don't need support engineers. Coding agents are going to be able to handle a lot of that. But there are still problem spaces that need to be developed, but you'll see the big players starting to solve those issues, right? So what do you do if you're coming out of school? How do you position your career? Well, for the people that are just coming out right now, it is just bad luck. It's like, this is the time you've come out, you finish your degree, and the world is changing underneath you. And so my suggestion would be, go back and get a product management, get an MBA and get into the business of product so that you can be a double threat, which is engineering skill along with product management and business management expertise. So you want a combination of the two, or go deeper and get something in cybersecurity, or go into hardware development, electrical engineering, glass engineering, anything where it's robotics or the hardware side of engineering, because there's going to be a lot of work for that. Development of materials and material manufacturing and all kinds of manufacturing. There will be a lot of that robotics and that tool chain through there. There's going to be a lot more on the sides, which were kind of the niche sides before. Now that's going to be the whole game, right? And so it's the software discipline that has been shaken up the most at the moment. But what we're looking at is a series of disruptions in engineering as robotics come into play that will again take any entry level, simple component work off the table. So what engineers have to do, or anyone in our field, we have to almost become better at our leadership skills, our ability to system design, product management, product business, UX, UI, security, all the things I'm mentioning. I mean, I'm just going to be a broken record on it because I think that unfortunately everyone needs to have all of it in order to be viable in the field. Like just saying I'm a Python developer. Well, maybe if you're going to go work for a traditional company that's still doing their digital transformation, maybe. So I'd say for the juniors, the entry level people, that's what's the most difficult. If you're already in now and you've gotten a job, but you're in a company and you're actually watching the layoffs happen, you are seeing there's kind of a bifurcation. I would say that the big tech players will be a lot of layoffs. They're in a position where I think they're going to need to show AI optimization translates to dollars saved because they're trying to make the case for AI, right? And adoption. But there are a lot of companies that are just doing digital transformation and they need the engineers and they would like it. And you should be leaning into AI tooling and you should understand its limits and its capabilities. And you should be really pressing your skills so that you can stay relevant and become a little bit of a 10x engineer. And I hate to use that word because I've always found the concept to be a bit irritating because it's usually like 1% of engineers are 10x engineers. But now with AI, it's realistic to expect that most engineers will understand machine learning. Most engineers will understand data engineering, that they will understand data structures, that they will understand ontology, that they will understand, scalability and latency and all these things that all the mid-level engineers are needing to do. Senior engineers and above are in the best position because they already had a broader perspective of the system. They already understood the dangers of complexity. And so they can slide in and become that tech lead or product lead, product engineering lead. They can slide into those positions. So for staff or for senior engineer on up, they're the most secure in their jobs at the moment, and they'll be able to get jobs as long as they're AI forward, right? If they're dragging the feet on AI, that's the problem for that cohort of engineers, because it's reasonable for any leadership team to say, is there a way that we could do this faster with an agentic approach? Or to be able to understand the models, their limitations, to be able to design systems that are model agnostic, that are company agnostic, because everything's changing really fast. You don't want to get trapped in a technology or a technology paradigm that's shifting away. Nobody wants to be stuck in legacy crap, right? And so for them, it's fine. And then management has its own set of concerns because there's this idea somehow that we're going to be able to flatten all the layers in the organization. And I don't know that that will be ultimately successful. I think that if you want to flatten your org, you should shrink your org. I don't think that it's fair to take a 10,000 engineer company and say, we don't need directors, senior managers anymore. It's just ridiculous because every level of human needs support, guidance, mentoring, coaching, connection making. It's not as simple as I'm a manager, I roll up data for the next level. I think managers are going to need to be a little bit more like TPMs. And I think if TPMs want to stay relevant, they need to start getting their value add in a world of AI out there. Because I don't believe that people think that TPMs are necessary anymore because AI will do all the coordinating. But we all know that's not how it's going to work. It's a lot more complicated than that. And so I think that there's a We're in a very messy time where for the human in the engineering world, it will be as inhumane as you can imagine. And I think that we will learn from early attempts to scale back and optimize, that companies will learn that they've made a mistake, that they've overly flattened, they've overly scaled down. And I actually would argue that whenever I see companies doing these layoffs, it's like, I understand what they're doing. I know they're trying to save money. Sure, that's great. It makes their stock pop. But what blows my mind is all of those companies have had product roadmaps with tons of features that their customers have been asking for years that are below the line. And they're not taking their existing talent and getting those engineers to, get those features out using AI, right? Why not deliver the whole roadmap, then lay people off? Right? But why leave your roadmap still unfinished with a bunch of key features, things that are connective tissue that would make your customers' lives much more friction free? But then you lay off most of the team so no one could ever get to it still. It's leadership is very short sighted. And I feel like it's leaders that are optimizing for stock price and not optimizing for customers. I know it's a lot of there, but it's a lot that I just came up with. But that's my view. And I think that once we start getting real leaders in place who focus on the customer completely, and they make the bottom line, they understand the flywheel, which is that when you do that, you will develop the money and et cetera. I think we'll see companies retrench from their current positions, and you'll see hiring happening, and engineers of all sorts will be able to do it. But again, that product capability will be a game changer for any engineer.
I was reading a recent survey which happened across 450 plus engineers and companies, and it said, like, across these 121,000 developers, that they spend like 90% of their time using AI, but the productivity is going only 10%. So how do you
people
see
are
this?
learning? They're learning it too. And I think that, once you develop an understanding of what the agent can do for you, it becomes a little easier. So why not have your agents write all your unit tests, for example? Like, there's a lot of things that you can do for continuous integration, continuous deployment, that you can have the agents automating. You can have them documenting your code for you and, confirming that the documentation they write is correct. Whether it's inserting comments, et cetera. You can have them analyze the system and write high-level system design docs, which will help you move faster. I don't think people are really thinking about it entirely. I think that some people pull a package down and they'll launch it and they'll let code develop something. But you still have to refine your prompts. You have to get better at telling it what to do. And then you have to be able to quality check the output, which in itself is time consuming and irritating, because now it's like you're code reviewing the agent. It's not nobody really wanted to code review your peers, but now all they do is just code review agent work all day long. And so the odds of kind of sleepwalking through that and feeling like it's slowing you down, it may be that it's not slowing them down, but it's putting them into doing work that they didn't want to do. Work that they thought of as like the ancillary extra stuff I had to do on top of my job. And now that's the whole job. And so that's where I think a little satisfaction and complaining comes in, and rightfully so. But we're, again, in a time where some people are just naturally picking up AI and agentic coding, and they're just rocking with it. And it's amazing. And others are not so lucky. And it could be the code base they're working on. It could be them and their understanding of what they have to play with. It could be many things. But I think that those surveys, when you look at them, there are a lot of them right now. I've seen surveys where people have said it makes them 50% more effective. And so it is dependent upon the level that the engineer is. And so you might want to take a look and see if that data is split by whether they're entry level, mid-career, senior level, because, that tells you a lot about what the person was assigned to do. Entry-level engineers are usually assigned small features. Agents can code those up pretty well. And the engineer doesn't necessarily, they're entry-level, so they're naturally a little happier about their life. Mid-career is usually where they're depressed. They don't see a problem. So they're like, this is great. It's helping me. I'm really becoming more productive. But then your mid-careers are like, oh, this is slowing me down, because it is. Technically, because they're doing all this code reviewing and they're not being able to ship the way they want to. And then seniors are being put in an even different situation where all of a sudden now they're having to act like TPMs. And it's like, so no one's really doing the job that they felt like they signed up for. And I think people have a legitimate complaint about that change in engineering, and we'll all make it through it, but it's just more frustrating.
Yeah. I was reading this viral hacker post this morning where one of the developer wrote, I'm losing my ability to code because I'm becoming 10 times dependent on AI. I'm curious, like, what's your take? Where do you feel AI is helping or AI is creating this dependency, or where developers just go by default and we are creating more production outage by just being dependent on that tool and it doesn't have whole background or context?
It's a dangerous time to let your skills atrophy, because the agents still need someone who understands the code. And so if you let your skills atrophy, then you can very quickly get to a point where the agents are building code that you actually start to lose an understanding about. Even if you can read it, it becomes complicated and there could be layers of abstraction and it starts to become harder to follow along. And so, but ultimately, this job of software engineer, I don't know if it's going to survive as it has. I mean, think about automation with regards to, I'll use factory automation for picking crops. And there's a lot of new machines out now where you tell them the crop type, it picks it, no human. They just drive the machine across the field. It might even be automated. And one might say, oh, well, we're going to lose our ability to bend over and pick a crop. And it's like, but no one should have been doing that anyway. It was hard work. It's brutal work in the sun, back-breaking work. At a certain point, if we lose our ability to understand how to garden, will there always be people tinkering on the edges? Yeah, but at a certain point, field goes away and it changes. And I think that might be what's happening. It's going to take a decade to really set in. There are so many jobs, so many companies that do not want AI at all. So there's companies that are like, nope, we're never going to do AI, but we will do software development and we will have stuff in the cloud. And then there are companies that are like, we want AI to optimize us, but we're going to still want software engineers to develop code along the edges. We don't want the AI to take over our software engineers. And then the spectrum will go to where you literally don't have a human in the mix at all. And you've got some company where it's built by an AI and it's managed by an AI. And these are the extreme players. So for the people that are like in a situation where they're being told and pushed to use AI more and more and more, they have to ask themselves, is this making me happy? Is this the job I want to do? Do I need to work? So for some of them, they don't need to work anymore. They've made enough money. They do it because they love it. And if you do it because you love it and you don't need the money, and there's a huge contingent of software engineers out there like that they've done really well, you can go and you can code to your heart's content and you don't need to take that job from somebody else who needs it. Step aside, let someone else have the seat. I'm serious, because there are going to be less and less jobs for coders out there. But if you do need the job and you don't want to be doing that, then you have to ask yourself, do I want to stay at this company? So if we use Amazon, for example, I can imagine within Amazon that they are leaning hard on everybody using AI for everything. So is being at Amazon the place to be for a person that wants to code? I don't know. I don't think so. I would rather see them go to a company that is more traditional, that is a smaller company, or a company that's like an old school player, more traditional, like a firm, or could be anything, Deere, Caterpillar, all Capital One. It's not like they're not using AI, but they code as well. They have strong coding arms. They're going to continue to. These are okay. You can try to change jobs while you have a job. Try to change a job, right? That's the best time to do it. Don't stay where you're miserable. But if it's at all intriguing, lean in and help bring it to the next phase, because ultimately those people that are pioneering within those teams, that are picking up, having, using co-work and using these tools to develop all the code, they're going to be the ones that are going to see all the problems. They're going to recognize the limitations. They're going to figure out how to solve them. That experience is going to be incredible, but it won't be coding experience. It will be engineering system, kind of larger, broader experience.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah, that's just my perspective, but yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk about human conditions. What do you think in this era, engineering manager, leader, VP, or across a big organization, CEO across a startup, what do they need so that the developers who are paranoid still work at their best work and put their best foot forward and not be paranoid, but just keep moving forward?
What do the leaders need?
Yeah, at this time.
That's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I think that each leader has to develop the management team that gives them the reassurance and the oversight that they need. The problem with, I think, our traditional org structures is they reward people who talk a good game, who are charismatic, who are light on details, because as you go higher and higher up, executives don't want as much detail. So it's much more easy for them to be manipulated, to be honest. And I feel that most of the people that I worked with many years ago who are now in big, tall, high positions of power, I think they're surrounded by yes people and they're protected from the truth. And I think that's a problem. In my ideal model, I would like to see every layer of management with a partner at a equivalent level of individual contributor, technically strong staff for a senior manager, principal for a director, whatever, however the org is. If it's little, then staff for a manager, blah, blah, blah. However, they need these tech ICs and not managers, tech ICs, and they need to listen to them because in an agentic world, the agents will tell you what you want to hear. They want to please you. Anthropics has a lot of papers about this, about how the agents, they're trying to please you. They're trying to give you what you ask for. So when you don't ask a good question, well, they fill in the gaps, they hallucinate, and they give you what they think you're asking for. Well, the problem as a leader, the more you assume that everything's working fine because you've got an automated house, that shop that's building your code. Well, those assumptions are what's going to get you. You won't find out for years that these assumptions are the poison pill in your code base. So I think that it would be a fiduciary suicide. I think it is suicide for a company to think that they should let go of their engineering talent wholesale and just replace it with AI and product managers, for example. Or I don't need to have mid-level managers. No, you do. You literally do. But you need to pick them with care and they need to be technically strong. And they also need to understand AI and they also need to be in the trenches to some degree so that when you ask a question, you're not getting a yes man response. You're getting the truth. You need the truth to manage.
I like how you said that engineering manager needs to be partner with the tech IC.
I think so.
Senior person need the tech IC who is really the voice of the engineers working on trenches because you don't want it to be filtered.
I mean, so much of what it's weird, right? As you get higher up, you're busy. And so you don't have a lot of patience. And so when people get into the details, it's like a detriment to the level. Like there's an engineer that I mentor right now, and he's not getting to the senior engineering level because he's too detailed in his communication style. And that's always a trap between SD2 and SD3. You have to learn how to speak to leaders and you have to be more brief and concise and all that. But it's the details that are the meat of these issues. And leaders, as they get higher up, become less and less concerned with that. And if you look at, for example, Elon Musk style, I know that a lot of people don't, he's not as popular as he was, but the truth is that his style is very interesting. He focuses on where the problems are. He goes and he dives deep, and that's where he'll spend his time. He's not looking for people to tell him stuff. He's like, where's the friction? Let me go and look at it. He's getting very personally involved. I think that's the leadership style of the future. I think the type of person that just wants to sit in a desk and have lots of meetings and just be surrounded by a bunch of people where you're doing a bunch of thought leadership. It's just what a waste of money and time. Like, what are you accomplishing? What are you getting done? What is your impact? How are you getting from point A to point B? And what is hanging you up? And why are you not personally understanding the edges of that problem? Or if you don't personally understand it, do you have someone that you can point to and say they own it? And that would be your TPM, that would be your principal, that would be your tech lead, that would be your staff, whatever. Those are the people that can own those problems and drive them to conclusion. So either you're going to do it or you've got to have them, but you certainly can't have another person like yourself under you that also just wants to sit in meetings and talk about shit, not really getting involved in the problems. You don't need multiple layers of those type of people. Those type of people, you can throw them away. They're not useful in the new world. You need people that are in it, because it's going to be very easy to float above it and think it's all working great until it comes crashing down.
Wonderful. This will be the last question. Anything you want to tell to the listeners who are listening to this podcast actively? One piece of advice, how to survive in this agentic AI world?
Be flexible. And I think use this as an opportunity to reevaluate what it is that you really want out of life. If it's money, then look at all the ways to make money and don't assume that the way that you were trained is the only way to get from point A to point B. Use your knowledge about the technologies that are up and coming to invest, make money that way, make money to work for you. It doesn't always have to be from just your engineering degree, right? Don't assume that. I think that a lot of jobs might go away in the short term. And what I worry about is that, well, people are like, oh, I'm just putting out resume after resume and nothing's happening. And it's so common, right? And I feel like when that starts to happen, you almost have to take a step back and say, am I on the right path? Am I on the right path for me? What am I doing this for? Like earlier at Amazon, and this is just a bit of a segue, I went through a bit of a crisis of the soul because it kind of hit me like all I'm doing is working for a company that just helps people buy shit. And so I'm just part of the consumer process of the world, which at the time I had thought of as a negative. Now, of course, after COVID and everything and having traveled the world, I recognize that companies that can deliver items to you that you need are hugely important because there's so many consumer deserts where there just aren't towns with enough to be able to even survive well. So Amazon and other companies like that are really helpful. But at the time, it was hard for me because it's like, I don't know if this is really what I want. But I hadn't quite figured out that my favorite customer were engineers. I hadn't figured out yet that voice the developer would just kind of really captivate me and become something I would be so invested in for so many years. I just loved it. But it was that crisis that led to that. And I think that when you're trying to find a job and it's just no one's biting and it's not working, you have to ask yourself, do I even want to be an engineer? Do I want to? I mean, would I prefer to save animals? Do I want to go into biotech? I mean, there's a lot of different variations that the world is going to go through now that are going to open up from all of this, these innovations that are just getting started right now. A lot of it is really exciting. Like if you can afford it or even have a couple friends, you want to give it a go, why not try your own thing? Why not take the bull by the horns and do what you want to do and solve a problem you want to solve? That's what I'm kind of hoping happens, is that we just find this really scrappy creator economy, but we're a creator economy on top of agentic AI as opposed to on an Instagram or a YouTube.
Wow. Leah, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Lena.
3 things I am taking from this conversation. 1, 2-pizza team is back. 4 or 5 people with right diversity of skills can now build and run an entire product with agentic AI. 2, if you are a senior engineer and you are AI forward, you are the most secure person in the room right now. Don't waste it. 3, the creator economy isn't built on Instagram or YouTube. It's built on top of agentic AI. And it's just getting started. If something Leah said landed, share this with one person who needs to hear it. If you want to work with Leah directly on your career, find her at leahmelvin.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep building, and bring someone along for the ride.